Lisa from High Point, North Carolina, has a 12-year-old. How do we approach the birds and the bees? Ooh, I have good stuff to say about this. All righty.
Entomologist, right?
Well, right?
Hey there.
Hi, Lisa. You're on with Claire,
How are
Janet,
you?
and Dale. How are you doing?
Doing fine.
Good, good. So birds and bees, eh?
Yeah, so he's 12, and he's definitely in between, still interested in, sleeping with a stuffed animal and but playing video games. And I'm trying my very best to be open with him, but I admit that I still have some lingering issues with my Catholic upbringing. So I'm just wondering, yeah. So I'm just wondering if there's any advice you can give on letting that go. Like, I'm having a hard time with some of the uncomfortableness of saying, once you get sexually active, it's kind of addictive, and that sort of thing. So I just really am trying to, I don't want to dissuade him from sex and certainly, protected sex, but at the same time, making sure that it's healthy and he's comfortable with it.
Right.
May I ask you a question, Lisa?
Certainly.
Could you talk a little bit about your communication with your son relating to sexual activity, masturbation, sexual thoughts, or anything that he might bring up or you might want to talk about with him?
I actually try to check in with him about every 3 to 6 months. So just the other day, for example, it was probably not the best circumstances, but on the way to school, I said, "Hey, do you have any questions for me?" and that sort of thing. Sometimes when we're listening to music on the radio, he has questions. What's that mean? Blah, blah, blah. And it just so happened, I can't even remember what the trigger was, but he said, "What does masturbation mean?" And I told him, "Oh, I was listening to George Carlin." And he and he was like, "What's that mean?" And I told him, I was comfortable with that, but there's been a couple other things that I haven't been, as easy about. And so I'm just trying to be as open as possible and let him know this is the truth. This is what happens, when you touch yourself, it feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can approach this from the viewpoint of a biologist. Unfortunately, religion puts a lot of weight on sexuality as being a bad thing. That's like saying hunger is bad. It's a natural drive. We have it. It's natural and normal. I say this from time to time, and it floors people usually, but it's just sex. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's sex." No, it's just sex. It's just sex.
Yeah.
We put so much stuff on it, and it's something that we all got here via.
Right.
And most of us are interested in doing that. I mean, there are asexual folk.
Sure.
But having a sexual attraction or having sexual feelings, that should just be incredibly normalized if you can. Catholic, too. Oh, my God, the hang-ups I've had to get over. Oh, my God. And I think being a biologist has helped a lot there. My husband is a Southern Baptist, and he is still uncomfortable with these things. So, for instance, years ago, I think Dale and I, we've talked about this before. A couple years ago, my kids had heard about Cards Against Humanity. Are you familiar with that game?
Yes.
It's super raunchy, right?
Right.
And they were very curious about it. And they said, "Can we play it?" And I thought, better learn it from me than somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so we sat with another couple whose child was also interested, and they were cool with it. And we played it. And, words would come up, and they'd say, "Well, what's a blowjob?" And I'd just define it. Just because, I mean, if you go, "Oh, God," you're going to put stuff on it that doesn't need to be there. It's just all church stuff, really. There doesn't need to be any shame about it. The whole sex positivity movement, I think it's a bad rap. It does not mean sexually promiscuous. It does not mean that you are uncareful or uncaring about the importance of sex. It just means that you see sex for what it is. It's important. It is a tremendous bonding thing. It feels good. Oh my God, the school system, it's scary. You're going to get diseases and you're going to die and you're going to get pregnant and don't even look at the opposite sex. And it's like, okay, then why is everybody so obsessed with it? Because it feels good. That needs to be right out there. There's a reason why people are interested.
An evolutionary reason why it feels
to feel good, or we wouldn't be here, right? There has to be that drive. So normalizing that as much as possible is important. I've talked for quite a bit here. Dale or Jan,
I've got something, but I want Dale to go next,
right,
and then
Dale,
I'll add in mine.
Go.
Oh yeah, when you said the school system, Claire, oh my gosh, I just our county introduced a new element in the curriculum. It was a PowerPoint slideshow that was going to be introduced to the curriculum, and they make it available for parents during the period when it's being considered. And I open up this slideshow. The first slide shows barbed wire.
Super.
It's got this barbed wire background, and it just lays out all the ways that sex can kill you. You know, this is the very first thing that you hear. So basically, sex ed becomes sex is a thing that can kill you. Oh, and also it's the reason we're all here. There are two resources I really recommend that people look into. One of them is the Unitarians, actually. Unitarian Universalism has one of the best sex ed curricula out there. It's called OWL, Our Whole Lives. And the curriculum, first of all, it starts off by saying sex is a wonderful thing. It's an important thing. It's biologically important. It's important in terms of evolution, but it's also a wonderful part of life. It's a way that people are, bond together. It starts with that. And then it says, oh, and you have to be careful because there are these potential consequences. That's the approach that you want to take. The other resource is an organization called SIECUS, SIECUS, which stands for the Sexual Information and Education Council of the United States. It's a nonprofit, SIECUS, and they are one of the driving forces behind the comprehensive sex ed movement. They've been around since the 60s, and they've got a lot of great resources available online. So between the Unitarian OWL, OWL, and SIECUS, you're going to find just about all the resources you need that can help you really get a perspective on how to approach a lot of these things. But put the positive first. That's just a best practice.
Yeah.
Definitely. Sounds good.
I was going to add a couple things. My daughter was going to a private school, and they enlisted the help of Planned Parenthood, which has this sex ed program. And I'm not necessarily saying that you'll want to hire them or anything like that, but they might have some really good suggestions of books and things. There was a series of books that each one covered like a different age range that my daughter and I read, and it was very funny and informative. But I can't remember the name off the top of my head, I'm afraid. Maybe someone, maybe we'll get a chance to Google before we finish this out. So anyway, if you can get some good suggestions for books, such as from Planned Parenthood or folks that you know, we may be able to put some on the YouTube comments a little bit later today, because I'd love to, recall that great series that we read from. The other thing I was going to suggest is a Netflix series called Big Mouth. Have you heard of it?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh. Big Mouth is okay. It's about puberty. It's about your kid. It's about all of our kids going through that.
It's an animated series.
So well written, so hilarious. I will say that even though I wasn't raised Catholic, I definitely was, that was something that was never discussed in my household, and as a result, I grew up, just not being afraid of sex, but feeling very out of touch with my sexual being. And so, when I watch that show, it makes me a little uncomfortable because it calls out all this stuff that, I never heard talked about when I was growing up. So I want to say, as a caveat, be prepared. You might be a little uncomfortable. I would watch the first episode by yourself just to, make sure you're comfortable with it. But I think it's fantastic for kids because it's out there. I mean, it does not, pull punches on anything.
Words.
It uses profanity. The characters, who are all kids, talk the way kids talk. And there's some great characters that are their mentors. I think you'll really have a lot of fun with that. So you may want to check out that.
Right.
It's Big Mouth on Netflix.
Right.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
Thanks for the tips.
Yeah, and I've got a couple more. Just your child was, you said 12, but for anybody who's listening, my really dear friend, and she is an expert on sex education for children and a parenting counsel, parenting coach, and overall fantastic social worker. She has helped me at every stage of raising my children with this. And sex ed starts from the very beginning by calling everything the right name. Calling things the wrong name gives the message that there's something a little off with it, and it also makes communication harder should something actually happen that they need to communicate to you about. And also being able to talk about those things like they're normal. Like, okay, I'm gonna wash your bottom now, and instead of, I don't know, what do people use that are silly words for that? We need to wash your penis now. When we're taking a bath,
Fanny.
Yeah, you don't say your tink or whatever. It's a penis, for goodness sakes. You don't have special words for your elbow or anything else. It's true, and so talk to them like they're normal people. They're not something that needs to be coddled like that. And the other thing that she always told me is, if you want to have those hard talks, you have to have incessantly the wallpaper talks. So how was your day? Do you like that color for the car? All of the things, talking constantly, because if you don't have those unimportant talks, they're not going to feel like they have enough connection to do the big talks.
And I just have to interject because there was a comment that you made, Lisa, saying something about, when your son is at the age when he's sexually active. And I just wanted to remind parents that children are sexually active from very, very young in their life, in a sense. So this idea that we all probably were raised with, which is, they get to be a certain age and then we have that talk. That's like the kind of the worst way to approach it.
It is.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I didn't do this as a parent because I was uncomfortable around the topic of sexuality. But, but I wish I had. I wish I had made the subject not something that, had to be kept at bay until a certain age, or until my daughter even, started to discover it on her own. I would have loved to have been walking with her through that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm proud of, is that when I was still a theist, I introduced things to him, the proper terminology, for example, and that sort of thing. And so that's one of the few things I'm excited about is I did that. And, another example is I'm 47 and he's 12 and I'm going through menopause.
Yeah.
And so, that was brought up jokingly by my husband, I think. and he was like, well, what's that? And I'm like, well, XYZ. And I was honest about it.
Right on.
So not only is he learning about how girls, initiate that, but now mommy is going through, not having to do that anymore. And that's kind of interesting. I really, that part, for whatever reason, that didn't make me uncomfortable, but there's a couple other things, like he wanted to know what oral sex was. And I'm like, oh. Okay,
It's
well.
perfectly well to take that breath.
And it would be
It's like a-
good to it would be good to find out, if you don't already know, where he's getting his information. Like,
Right.
where did he hear
most of
that
it,
term?
Well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, what I remember is that most of the cases where he questions that is either he's watching a YouTube video
Yeah.
where they mention something that's similar, or music on the mainstream radio. And I can't remember what we were listening to, but something referred to oral sex, and I was like, "Well, this is what it is," And I tried my best to not.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I wasn't asking that because you have to be all vigilant now and put all these controls on. It just we had a show a month or so ago where we were talking about internet education and that kind of thing. And
Right.
Another thing I wish I had done better was just kind of being more aware and having talked with my daughter more about what sites she was visiting. And what YouTube videos she was watching and things like that.
Yeah.
So just being there like you're doing by he probably feels like very comfortable, asking questions of you. He seems to, and that's the best you can do, is just have those open lines of communication. So congrats on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple more things.
Yeah.
I keep thinking
Great.
of things.
This is such a good question.
It is.
We're not going to let you go right away.
We're rich with stuff. I was taught this from another mother who knew. Make sure your son does he know how to do laundry?
Yes.
All right, good. Because then, should he have? I could only think of
Nocturnal
socks
emissions?
or nocturnal emissions. He can take care of it, and you don't have to be involved at all, which is nice for him.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me,
Right.
but you don't want him to feel uncomfortable about it. And the other thing
Absolutely.
that I found I have two children, and the older one is extraordinarily private about who he has crushes on and whether he's even been in a relationship yet or whatever. And that was hard for me because we were super close, but I've had to let him have his private stuff because I have
Very
my
important.
private
Yeah.
stuff. And my daughter, on the other hand, is like, ooh, telling me all the things. And that's another way of doing it, and that's fine. So every
Right.
kid's different. And, I
Yep.
think that you're checking in is awesome. I mean, that's what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also in recovery from alcoholism, so I'm really on top of him as far as, I'm trying not to tell him you can't experiment with this, but I'm at least trying to say, here are some of the consequences you may experience if you do this, and now that mommy is like this, you have a greater chance of experiencing, some tough stuff if
Yeah.
you try alcohol, pot, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I know that it's not a one and done type thing. You have to, or I feel strongly that every 3 to 6 months checking in and saying, so what do you think about this? Who's talking to you about
Right.
this?
If it feels
That
like
sort
it's
of thing.
been a while, then
Yeah.
bring it up, because they are thinking about these things, whether they're
yeah.
talking about them
Right.
or not.
Don't think they're not.
Exactly.
And just like sex, the booze and drugs thing, talk about
Yeah.
how good it feels. Because otherwise they're like, well, if this
Right.
is so damned evil, why does anybody do it? And then the first time they take
Exactly.
a drink and get a little tipsy, they're like, oh, this isn't so bad. What are they talking about?
Right.
You've got to tell them the whole story, or else
Yeah.
they'll get in there and not understand what you're talking about, and disbelieve you as well. They'll be like, this isn't so bad.
Right.
I don't know what my mom's talking about. Drinking is fun.
Which is why they sometimes think we're hypocrites. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, we experimented with it and some of us had a bad time, you know, and we admit that, sometimes some people don't have a bad time with it and others do.
Right on.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much for your
We really
outstanding
appreciate your
call.
yeah.
Hey,
Great
call us
question.
back and
All right.
let us know if you have any new insights. All right.